Welcome back to Dan's Messy Garage. This is going to be part 9 of working on the Budget 302 build. Yesterday I put in the crank, torqued it down, and slid in the cam. There's an old school tip trick you can do. Like these rod caps were torqued yesterday. Today I'm going to take a BF hitch. Take this. I want to hit the crank, but I want to hit the bearing cap. That's to make sure that they're seated correctly. And then you go and retorque them. None of these should move, but that's just a safety precaution. That didn't move, it just clicked. Same there. Okay, so none of them moved. So I'm really confident that those are good and tight. Crank turns easy. And I was going to mention something else that slipped my mind. When I think of it, I'll let you know. But today I'm going to start doing the timing chain. Now, I could put it on there now, put it dot to dot, but I want to do like a degree wheel on it to check where it just happens to be with the dot to dot. If possible, I might want to advance it a few degrees. So I'm going to hold off doing that. Yes, I could put it on now. And then, yeah, let's just do that. I'll put it on now. My mind is going a lot faster than my mouth. I'm going to put it on now, and if I have to move it later, I will. Because see, I was starting to say, I've got to get all the pistons in there, because you need to get number 1 up on top dead center when you do that. I'm going to roll the block over so it's not upside down. It almost got me. All right, these bolts are tight. There's a pin that goes in the cam. It locks the cam gear in the correct orientation to the cam. And that fuel pump eccentric goes on the outside of the gear. So I'm going to get all that stuff ready. I should have what I need to put it on now. I got the gears. I got the little pin. I got the chain. Now the gears have marks. There's a dot there, and then this bottom one has 3 dots. There's 3 keyways, 3 dots. A circle, a square, and a triangle. Pretty sure that the circle is like for straight up. I'm going to put that there. This is going to go in there with the dot down, this dot up. So we get the oily chain on there. It's going to be dripping and making a mess. And see if I can get this all slid into position. that pin that's in the hole, if you had a one-piece eccentric, you'd use a long pin, and the pin would be sticking through, and it would come through a hole in the eccentric and turn it. This is different. This has got a peg that needs to go in that hole, so that pin can't be too far out. Of course, I would probably just push it in. But I want to put a lot of oil in between these two. Like that. That's going to go on there. Then there's a big, thick washer goes on that bolt. Let me get the correct socket to put all this together with. Be back in a flash. Okay, it takes 5/8 socket, and I believe it's 45 foot-pounds of torque, but I'm not going to torque that yet because I want to put pistons in and check the cam, degree it. That chain's nice and tight, like it should be. This would be a good time to illustrate how this eccentric thing here works for the fuel pump. See, as I turn this, turning the crank, you can see that that's kind of like wobbling on there. Okay, this is the timing cover. And that has a provision here for a fuel pump. The timing cover is going to go right on the engine like this. Then the fuel pump is going to fit in through here with this big long arm going in there. And that big long arm, I'll take this out. See, the fuel pump's going to be in here. That big long arm is resting at the bottom of this eccentric. Now when you turn the crank, it's going to push that eccentric down. So this, I don't know if you can hear that. But that's how that works with that eccentric on there. I'll show you how I put the rings on one piston, and then I'll just do the rest. The directions, they show different markings, and if it says top or T or has an O on it, it goes up. Unmarked rings go in. It says unidentified rings may be installed either side up. And I'm looking at the rings. Got top groove, second groove, third groove, or oil rings. Top groove, they're not marked at all. So these can go in either way. There's no top and bottom. I like that. Now these others, the second groove, they say top right on them. And then the oil ring is, they're 3-piece rings. I'm going to start with putting the oil ring on there. You take one of these expanders. They don't have a top or bottom. Let's put it in that groove first. And they butt together. You take a thin ring, and you can just spiral that on. I like to have things not line up, all the slits are offset. When you put these in, you gotta make sure that oil ring is buttoned against itself and not overlapping. Okay, one split ring goes under it, one goes on top of it. So I find the split, put the other split over here somewhere. Just like that. That oil ring is in. None of the splits are lined up. It's not overlapping. It moves freely. I'm going to go with the second groove. This one has a top on it. I have a piston ring installer pliers. All it does is grab the ring and spread it open. So you spread it open just enough to get it over the piston top and into that groove. Just like that. Now, top ring, I've looked a couple times and there's just no marks on them. So this can go on any way you want. Just like that. Now when I install it in the engine, I make sure that none of these gaps are lined up with each other. You know, kind of like that. Like I got a gap up here, a gap down there. Oil rings, I'm not really concerned about those gaps because you can see that that's full of gaps and holes. So I'm going to do the rest of them, and then I'll show you how I stick one of them in the block. All the rings are on, and I was just checking, make sure that all of them have the numbers stamped on the caps. Like this is number 8. And this would be number 7. And so forth. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and this is number 1. There's a number on the rod and on the cap. And those numbers all face out when you put them in the engine. There's a dot on these pistons. There's either a dot, a notch, an arrow, or something to indicate the front of the block. So you have to pay attention to that when you put it in. Now these all have the old bearings in them. So I'll just show you how I put one set of bearings in, and then I'll do the rest. Take the nuts off. Pull that off. Get the old bearings out, you just kind of give it a push or a twist to the side, and they should come right out of there. Same with the rod. Just pull them out. Ultrasonics beeping. I have my exhaust headers in there right now, just cleaning them up. I want to take and wipe out these saddles where the bearings go. So there's nothing in there to get trapped behind the bearing. And grab a shell, just like on the block. Put the little notch on the bearing and the notch in the cap. Push it in there. Same thing with the other side. Notch. Push it in there. Now when you look at this, you can see the notches are both on the right, but when you flop this one over or put it on, now the notches are going to be like one here, one there. They don't line up. They're not supposed to. So that's it. That goes on the crank with a bunch of oil. And I'm going to put the bearings in the rest of these, and then we'll slide over to the engine and put one in. I'm going to get things ready here to put the pistons in. I'm going to start with number 1 right up here. And what I like to do is look in there and get the crank turned so that the rod journal is down at the bottom. Right there. I should have everything I need now. Got tapered ring compressor. The opening on the top is bigger than the opening on the bottom. The opening on the bottom is going to be like the same bore as the block. And the taper takes the piston rings and kind of compresses them in and allows you to put the piston into the block. Got some rubber hoses. Then I put on the threads like this. That's just to protect the crank down there. When these go in, they're not nicking the crank. I have some oil, and I have a hammer. I'm going to use the hammer handle to pop it in the block. The cap is there. And so what I'll do, put some oil on the side of the piston and on the rings. Now, I know some people will take the piston rings, stick them in a coffee can full of oil, pick it up dripping wet, shove it in there. All that oil can get in behind the rings and cause you to have a lot of carbon deposits because it gets trapped back there. So I just put a little bit on. I spin it around, make sure that there is oil in there, but not so much as to coke up the piston. So when you put these in, I want to separate my rings. Put one over there, one over here. I'm just concerned about the two thicker rings. The oil ring I'm not concerned about. I'm going to put a little oil on the bearing, half. I'm on the crank down there. Perfect. And the numbers that are on the rod and the cap go out to the side of the block. And this dot or notch goes to the front of the engine. I'll stick this in there. Just make sure none of the piston ring gaps don't line up with the split in this ring compressor. Do it like this. And you just got to kind of squeeze this in there and push each ring in as you shove the piston in there. Take your time. And this is going to squeeze those rings. Push them into the piston groove. Like that. So now, dot to the front, we drop these down. Get the piston in the block. Then you got to hold this down to the block as you smack the piston in there. Just like that. The taper compresses the rings and it goes into the block, and that's all set. I'll shove that down. Then we put the rod cap on and 2 bolts with some oil. I just put the bolts on like finger tight for now. The nuts, I mean, on the rod bolts. And then later on, I'll torque them. Pull my little rubber hoses off. Make sure my numbers line up. Slide that on. That's it for one. Just have 7 more to do. I'll time lapse you as I do those 7. And then we'll come back and torque these rod bolts. I got to look up the torque. It might be 20 to 25 foot-pounds, but I'll check it. Those 4 went in nice and easy. Flop it over and do this side. Making sure there's no fuzz or anything in the cylinders. So it's going to be just like I did on the passenger side of the engine. Now it's time to torque those rod bolts. Spin the old engine over. $25 foot-pounds on the bolts. I'm going to turn the crank so I can get to most of them here. Get my torque wrench, the socket, and start torquing. I'm going to do it in 3 stages, like 10, 18, and 25. There's 10. When I was torquing the mains yesterday, probably a couple of guys out there getting their panties in a wad and crying because I didn't start in the middle and go out to the ends. You got to think about this, people. That rod cap gets seated against the block. It's not going to go anymore. All you're doing is stretching the bolts as you tighten them. So me starting at one end and going to the other is fine. You don't have to worry about that. Now on a head, that's different because you're compressing a gasket. We're not compressing any gaskets here. I was just tightening metal to metal, the rod cap to the block. Get these where I can get to them easier. Aha, as I'm sitting here tightening these, I looked right over here and I can see a hole through the block. That's where the dipstick tube would go in on a Fox Body Mustang. My dipstick's going to go in the front. I need to plug that hole up. Okay, that was 10 foot-pounds. I'm going to go to 18. Okay, final torque, 25. 25. These a double click just for fun. This is a really a low budget rebuild, folks. Standard bore, didn't have to pay a machine shop to bore it or hone it. I did the honing in my garage with a dingle ball hone. It's all standard size rod and main bearings. I polished the crank myself. Regular cheapy rings, normal bearings. And if you noticed, I didn't check bearing clearances on rods or mains. I used them right out of the package. A little bit of that's experience because I've done this before. And if they were too tight, I wouldn't be able to turn it like this. And that's all 8 pistons in there. All the rods torqued, the mains torqued. We're good. Now I suppose I could take the hammer and give these caps a little love tap and retorque them. For the sake of doing it, I will. I don't think it's going to really affect anything, but that was just a click, click, and click, click. If you're putting this engine together first time or different parts from other engines, you'd want to check a lot more than I'm checking. There's side clearance between all these rods. You want to check that between the rods and the crank. I'm not doing any of that because this all came out of the engine as it was running in the car. None of these are moving, they're just clicking. All right, so that's done. Now I really can't put the oil pump or pan. I could probably put the oil pump on. I can't put the oil pan on yet because I like to do the front timing cover before I put the pan on to make sure it's all going to line up. So I'm going to take a little break here, and then we'll be back. My microphone decided to act up on me just now, but I was explaining I just went through a couple hours of hell putting all 16 lifters assemblies back together, put dog bones in the block, spider tray, bolts. I used red Loctite, torqued them to 10 foot-pounds. And that reminds me of a quote from one of my favorite movies. And it's, I always torque to the maximum allowable torquage. Who said that and what movie was it from? I'm going to attempt to show you how I degree a cam. Got a bunch of stuff set up here. I don't need this right now. I have a dial indicator on the piston. That's this one. That dial indicator there is on the lifter. I got a degree wheel on the crank. Now, if I watch this dial indicator here, as I bring the piston up to top dead center, when that gauge stops moving, that would be 0. There. And then I set that pointer at the TDC mark. All right, and I'm going to go clockwise and find the maximum lift on the intake lifter. Okay, it's starting to go up. It's 100, 200. Right about there. 81 and a half or 82. And that's saying the intake center line is about 115. So what you do then, go back to that maximum point there. Set this at 0. See if I can repeat it. Somewhere there. Now to get it more accurate than about 115-ish, I'm going to move it 50 thousandths, read the degree wheel, then I'm going to go 50 thousandths the other direction, read the degree wheel, and the true center intake center line will be between those two. So if I go clockwise and watch that gauge and stop when it's at 50, there, and I read this, there's 160, maybe 160 and a half. Then I go back. I see my pointer scraping on there. That's not good. Go 50 the other direction. About there. And it's about 67. I didn't write down the other one. I don't know what it was. All right, let's try again. That's 67. So now I come back here. about 160.5. $67. 160.5 and 67. So halfway in, exactly halfway in between there will be the intake center line. Let me get a calculator and figure that out. I've done it a few times off camera. 160.5, 67.5. Add those up, divide by 2, 114. So the intake center line of this is 114. Now, I need to get online and see what the factory 5-liter Mustangs had for an intake center line. I'll be back. All right, I gave up reading all that. I've been searching. Ford doesn't list it. People on different forums list what they measured on their stock ones, and they're anywhere from let's say 114 to 116. So this is right in the ballpark, 114. It lines up nice with the degree wheel intake center line area, because they're saying between 100 and 120. And I'm going with it. I'm going to take that cam bolt out, put some red Loctite on it, shove it in there, torque it to 45, and move on. I got the degree wheel taken off and the dial indicators taken off. And speaking of taking off, I'm going to be taking off. I'm running out of steam, and I'm going to call this the end of part 9 working on the budget 302. I did get all the pistons in and lifters in, and the timing chain is on and tight. And I thank you for watching Dan's Messy Garage. Stay tuned to the channel for more parts of this engine build and other videos. Bye.